In the exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, Olivia Montgomery woke up before her alarm on a morning when harsh winter air enveloped the streets. Outside her window, snow had begun to fall, and the dim sky announced the arrival of dawn. She jumped out of bed, took a shower, and quickly changed into her work clothes. On the wall of Olivia's room hung an impressive Harvard Medical School diploma. Her medical license was displayed next to it, hanging slightly crooked. Those certificates seemed to be looking at her current life with bewilderment. Olivia downed a cup of strong coffee and grabbed her pickup truck keys. Her hands weren't the soft hands of a doctor but were tanned and a bit rough. Daily labor at construction sites had gradually erased the traces of her medical student days. Another day to give it my all, she muttered to herself as she climbed into her old pickup truck and headed toward the downtown redevelopment area. Her destination was the site of a major project converting an old 19th-century warehouse into luxury condominiums. Olivia put on her harness, donned her safety helmet, and greeted the site supervisor, Mike. "Morning, Olivia. Today we need to reinforce the beams on the third floor. Can you continue from where you left off yesterday?" "Of course, Mike. Leave it to me." Olivia went up to the third floor and began working with the other laborers. Her movements were efficient, and her voice clear when giving instructions. Anyone who knew her from her medical school days would surely have doubted their eyes. 5 years ago, Olivia had suddenly quit her residency at Boston General Hospital and started working for a construction company. It was an impulse she couldn't explain even to herself. But every time she touched wood and participated in the process of shaping a building, she felt something being fulfilled deep within her soul. It was a feeling she had never experienced in the medical field. During lunch break, Olivia opened her lunchbox and sat with the other workers. They no longer found her background strange and treated her as just another colleague. However, occasionally, when she offered professional advice to a coworker with a complex fracture or demonstrated her medical knowledge in first aid situations, they would jokingly call her Dr. Olivia. "Want to go for drinks tonight?" "It's Joe's birthday," young worker Eddie invited. "Sorry, I need to get home early. I'm taking a few days off starting tomorrow." "Days off? That's unusual. Going somewhere?" Olivia's expression clouded slightly. "It's my grandfather's birthday. There's a family gathering." "Oh, that famous doctor family," Eddie began to say but then fell silent. Olivia's family situation was the subject of rumors at the site. Why would the daughter of Dr. Stanley Montgomery, one of the nation's top neurosurgeons, be working as a construction worker? Many speculations circulated, but everyone knew she avoided the topic. "Anyway, good luck," Eddie said, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. "Thanks," Olivia smiled. After finishing work and returning to her apartment, Olivia collapsed onto the sofa. Checking her smartphone, she found a message from her sister Caroline. "What time will you arrive at Grandpa's house tomorrow?" "Everyone's gathering, so come early." Olivia sighed. Everyone meant her parents were included. Dr. Stanley Montgomery was a neurosurgeon who had successfully performed numerous difficult surgeries and published innovative research in the medical field. His wife, Dr. Margaret Montgomery, was also an obstetrician respected in the community. And her sister Caroline was making her mark as a young physician, publishing papers in medical journals and becoming her parents' pride. The Montgomery family's expectations had been directed at Olivia as well. But she had betrayed those expectations. Olivia stood up and took a beer from the refrigerator. On the living room shelves were antique woodworking tools she had collected. For some reason, looking at them always calmed her. Especially precious was the carpenter's tool with the engraving in Montgomery that she had found last week during a demolition job. She thought it was just a coincidence to share the same surname, but she felt something fateful about it. The phone rang, and Olivia smiled when she saw the screen. It was her grandfather Walter. "Olivia, how are you?" "I'm looking forward to tomorrow." Grandfather Walter's voice was strong. He was the only one in the Montgomery family who didn't condemn Olivia's choice but rather showed understanding. "Grandpa, I'm glad you're well. I'll definitely be there tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing you." Don't worry about Stanley and Margaret. Those two have always been stubborn. I know, Olivia smiled wryly. Grandpa, there's actually something I wanted to ask you about. I found an old carpenter's tool with a Montgomery engraved on it. We'll talk about that tomorrow, her grandfather said in a tone that suggested he was contemplating something. It's a long story. After hanging up, Olivia opened her closet to look for something to wear tomorrow. She needed to choose an outfit appropriate for a member of the Montgomery family, not as a construction worker. Even after all these years, she was still forced to play the role of the daughter who betrayed expectations, in front of her family. Nevertheless, it was a comfort that her grandfather understood her choice. Unlike the rest of the family, he didn't call her passion for construction an inexplicable strange hobby or an extended rebellious phase. Rather, he watched over her with an attitude suggesting he knew something, or was waiting for something. Olivia lay down on her bed, reflecting on tomorrow's family reunion. Her family probably still wouldn't understand her decision to leave the medical path and plunge into the world of construction. But she had no regrets about her choice. Each day of hard work brought her a fulfillment she couldn't express in words. Tomorrow, she would once again have to defend her choice in front of her family. But Olivia was prepared. And at her grandfather's birthday party, she intended to ask about the mystery of that old carpenter's tool. Arriving at her grandfather's mansion, Olivia paused for a moment. This house, with its impressive white columns and red brick walls, seemed to embody the Montgomery family's history and dignity. Before placing her hand on the front door, she took a deep breath. Steeling herself to face her entire family for the first time in 5 years, she rang the doorbell. Her sister Caroline opened the door. Olivia. You finally made it. Caroline embraced her sister. Everyone's already here. As she stepped into the living room, all eyes turned toward her. Aunts, uncles, and cousins had gathered. The conversation among the gossiping aunts suddenly stopped. Olivia acutely felt how her strong hands and tan skin, honed at construction sites, seemed out of place in this refined space. Well, Olivia, her mother Margaret approached with a cold smile. It's been a while. Finally found time? Olivia didn't argue with the sarcastic tone, she just smiled. Mom, you're looking well. Her father Stanley merely glanced at her before continuing his conversation with cousin Michael, a doctor, about the healthcare system. Olivia spotted her grandfather Walter sitting quietly in the corner of the room and headed in his direction. Happy birthday, Grandpa. The old man's face lit up. Olivia. You came. He gripped his granddaughter's hand firmly. It's been a while. I'm glad to see you looking well. She sat next to her grandfather and began speaking in a low voice. About that tool, actually. However, the maid announced that dinner was ready, interrupting the conversation. Everyone moved to the dining room. Facing the lavish spread on the table, the family took their seats. Olivia was relieved to be seated next to her grandfather. Meanwhile, her parents and sister Caroline sat across from her. Before we eat, a toast, Father Stanley raised his glass. Father, happy 90th birthday. Here's to your health and long life. As everyone clinked glasses, Olivia exchanged smiles with her grandfather. But the moment of relief didn't last long. As the meal progressed, Mother Margaret brought up a topic. Everyone, do you know about Caroline's wonderful news? Her paper on pediatric neurological treatment has been published in an international medical journal. And she's the youngest ever to achieve this, they say. Praise rose from the relatives, and Caroline blushed modestly. I'm proud of our family of physicians, Margaret deliberately looked at Olivia. And almost all of our children turned out well. A heavy silence fell over the table. Olivia, how have you been recently? Aunt Eleanor asked, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. Olivia put down her fork and answered quietly. I'm working on a redevelopment project in downtown Boston. It's a wonderful project bringing new life to a 19th century warehouse while preserving it, and I'm mainly responsible for reinforcing and redesigning the old wooden structures. Well, that's interesting. Eleanor's expression showed confusion. Olivia continued, recently, I've been researching the relationship between building design and human psychological responses, especially the connection between therapeutic environments and recovery processes. Enough. Father Stanley suddenly slammed the table. The dishes jumped, and everyone turned in surprise. Is that what you want to say? That you're proud of throwing away your medical knowledge to become a mere construction worker? Dad, I haven't thrown away medicine. I'm just using it in a different form. Be quiet. Stanley's angry voice echoed throughout the room. Don't you know the history of the Montgomery family? We are a family of physicians spanning 3 generations. My grandfather was a doctor, I am a doctor, your mother is a doctor. And Caroline has become an excellent doctor. But you. His face reddened with anger as he stood up. You are a failure who has tarnished our family's tradition. Get out. The blood drained from Olivia's face. Mother Margaret also stood up and said tearfully, in a family with only doctors, to choose construction, you're a disgrace. The relatives sat with their mouths open, at a loss for words at this unexpected turn. Caroline remained seated with a complicated expression, clutching her napkin. Olivia placed her napkin on the table with trembling hands and stood up. I simply chose my own path. That. But she couldn't continue. The 5-year gap had instantly widened into a deep rift, tearing at her heart. At that moment, the usually gentle and quiet grandfather Walter slowly rose. Leaning on his cane, he spoke quietly but with authority. Don't you all know? There was a strange weight to his words. The expressions of Father Stanley and Mother Margaret changed instantly, turning pale. In Grandfather's eyes was the resolve to reveal a truth long kept secret. Silence dominated the room. Grandfather Walter's words seemed to have stopped time. The relatives looked at each other in confusion, trying to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, the blood had completely drained from Stanley and Margaret's faces. Father, what are you trying to say? Stanley asked with a trembling voice. Grandfather Walter looked at Olivia and smiled gently. Olivia, did you bring that tool? Olivia carefully took a package from her handbag and handed it to her grandfather. You mean this, Grandpa? Walter carefully unwrapped it and took the polished old woodworking tool in his hand. The engraving Montgomery remained clearly visible on the side of the tool. He held the tool to his chest and closed his eyes. Everyone, please wait a moment. Walter stood up and, leaning on his cane, left the room. His steps showed determination beyond his years. A few minutes later, he returned carrying an old leather trunk. Olivia rushed over to help him carry it. Thank you, Olivia, her grandfather smiled at his granddaughter. It seems the time has come to tell the family the truth. Walter opened the trunk and began taking out yellowed newspaper articles and old photographs. Among the items in grandfather's hands appeared an old set of carpentry tools with the same design as the one Olivia had found. Stanley, Margaret, and everyone, Walter began speaking quietly. The Montgomery family has always been believed to be a family of physicians spanning 3 generations. However, that is only half the truth. Walter took out the first photograph. It showed a man standing in front of a sign that read Montgomery Construction. This is my father, your great-grandfather, William Montgomery. He showed the photograph around. He was a master craftsman who worked in New York and Boston from the late 19th to early 20th century. Parts of the Boston Public Library and Massachusetts General Hospital were also built by his company. Next, Walter spread out an old newspaper article. The headline, A Montgomery Construction, a key player in the American Renaissance, remained vivid despite the passage of time. The Montgomery family was originally renowned for construction and woodworking. They were particularly known for innovative designs in medical facilities that considered the patient's therapeutic environment. The living room was enveloped in complete silence. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. Her grandfather's words were the key to solving the mystery in her heart. But with the Great Depression of 1929, the construction industry was devastated. Montgomery Construction was no exception and faced bankruptcy, Walter continued sadly. My father William made a major decision to protect his family. He poured all his remaining assets into sending me, his son, to medical school. Grandfather sighed deeply. Father told me, times have changed. From now on, being a doctor is the way to support the family. Forget the days of construction. Stanley was dumbfounded. Why weren't we told about this? Walter answered with a bitter expression. William was reluctant to talk about the past due to the embarrassment of losing his former glory. He became convinced that medicine was the only correct choice, and I didn't question it. When I succeeded as a doctor, he locked away the memories of the past in this trunk and never spoke of them again. Grandfather turned to Olivia. When I was young, I thought my father was right. But as I grew older, I began to feel an inexplicable longing for architecture within myself. That drove me to explore our family's history. Grandfather looked at Stanley. Son, when you chose the path of medicine, I thought there was no need to talk about the past. You seem to be carrying on the new tradition of the Montgomery family. Tears were streaming down Margaret's face. But why now? Look, Walter gently took Olivia's hand. I noticed that the blood of our ancestors flows strongly in Olivia. Her choice is neither rebellion nor whim. It's the call of her soul. Walter took out the last treasure from the trunk. It was a model of a small wooden house. It was intricately crafted and maintained its beauty despite the passage of time. Olivia, do you remember this? Grandfather asked quietly. You made it when you were 5 years old. Olivia touched the model with trembling hands. I made this? Yes. That day, I saw the talent of our ancestors in you. I've been watching over you ever since. The room was shrouded in silence. The relatives looked at the old photographs and tools with expressions mixing shock and understanding. Caroline moved closer to her sister and placed a hand on her shoulder. The inexplicable passion inside me. Olivia's voice trembled with tears. It was a gift from my ancestors. Stanley and Margaret were at a loss for words. Their worldview had collapsed in an instant. The tradition of being physicians, which they believed was the only right path, and had forced upon their daughter, was actually just a small part of their family's history. Medicine and architecture. Olivia slowly formed her words. Both are technologies that support and protect people's lives. Perhaps within me, these two have always been calling to each other. Grandfather Walter embraced his granddaughter. You were never wrong, Olivia. With your knowledge of medicine and passion for architecture, you are inheriting the true legacy of the Montgomery family. Stanley took an old photograph with trembling hands and stared at it intently. It showed his great-grandfather, who resembled him, standing proudly in front of a building. Confusion and regret crossed his face. Margaret began crying as if her suppressed emotions had exploded. What have we done? She choked on her words. Caroline sat next to Olivia and, crying, held her sister's hand. Sis, I'm sorry. We didn't know. Tears overflowed from Olivia's eyes. She felt the loneliness and questions she had carried for years dissolving in an instant. The passion within her wasn't a mistake, but the core of her own identity. Grandfather Walter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Boston in white. Family history is complex and sometimes forgotten, he said, gazing out the window. But the truth eventually reveals itself. Especially when someone appears who should inherit it. He turned back toward Olivia. What you found isn't just a tool. It's our legacy, a bridge connecting our past and future. The entire family felt that a new chapter of the Montgomery family had opened in that moment. After several hours had passed, many of the relatives left early to digest this shocking family truth. Only the core family remained: Stanley, Margaret, Caroline, Olivia, and Walter. They had moved to the study. The fire in the fireplace burned quietly, filling the room with soft light. Portraits of generations of the Montgomery family hung on the walls, their gazes seemingly watching over this historic moment of reconciliation taking place in the room. After a long silence, Olivia stood up. Tear stains marked her face, but her eyes were filled with determination. Dad, Mom, she began slowly, choosing her words carefully. I've been searching for the source of the passion inside me all this time. You, who called it a disgrace, were the ones who had forgotten our family's true tradition. Olivia's voice was quiet, but her words carried strength. The construction site had honed not only her body but her spirit as well. Stanley's eyes no longer held the disappointment they usually did when looking at Olivia. Instead, there was a mix of complex emotions. That doesn't justify abandoning the path of a physician, he said. His voice wasn't as strong as before, but he still seemed unable to completely let go of his resistance. Look at Caroline. She's successful as an excellent doctor. You had that talent too. Stop comparing me and Caroline. Olivia interrupted her father's words. We just chose different paths. Neither is superior. Margaret stood up from her chair and walked to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall quietly. Even so, just a site worker. She said tearfully. Caroline, who had been listening silently until now, finally spoke up. Mom, that's not right. Sis isn't just a worker, she looked at Olivia. I looked up your company name once. It's Innovative Living, right? Olivia looked at her sister in surprise. Caroline continued, I saw it in a medical journal. In a feature on therapeutic environments and recovery processes, your company was introduced as having an innovative approach. A heavy silence fell. Olivia took a deep breath and steeled her resolve. Actually, there's something I'd like to show you all. She took out a sketchbook from her bag. The handmade leather cover had Montgomery engraved on it. This is my collection of projects. Olivia opened the sketchbook. It contained numerous original hospital designs that utilized her knowledge as a physician. Precise drawings, detailed annotations, and spaces expressed in beautiful colors. They weren't mere architectural drawings but could be called works of art. I never abandoned medicine, Olivia explained as she turned the pages with trembling hands. Rather, I wanted to combine construction techniques with medical knowledge to create spaces that help patients recover. She opened to a specific page. It showed a renovation plan for a large hospital. This is the renovation project for the pediatric ward of Boston General Hospital. I designed it after many discussions with doctors, researching environmental factors that affect patients' psychological states and recovery rates, Olivia's voice caught. Last week, this plan was officially adopted. Wait, Caroline suddenly exclaimed. That project. I know about it, she said with a surprised expression. It's the talk of the entire hospital. It's called the Revolutionary Healing Space. You mean, that's your... Tears welled up in Caroline's eyes. Sis wasn't abandoning her knowledge as a doctor, she was trying to save lives in a different way. Stanley was intently examining Olivia's sketches one by one. As a neurosurgeon, he had performed thousands of surgeries and saved many lives. But now, before his eyes, lay a different way to help patients. This design. Stanley began analyzing the plans with a professional eye. The window placement's effect on mental state, the efficiency of movement lines, infection control zoning. His voice gradually became excited. This is a design impossible without medical knowledge. Olivia nodded. My learning in medical school wasn't wasted. Rather, it has become my strength. Margaret sat next to Olivia, staring at another page of the sketchbook. This maternity ward design. From her perspective as an obstetrician, her specialty, she noticed the details. Spatial arrangement considering women's psychological reassurance during childbirth, emergency response routes, it's wonderful. Stanley said with a trembling voice, I was fixated on the idea that becoming a doctor was the only path. But there's no need to be a doctor to use medical knowledge. He slowly stood up and walked to the window. Standing alongside grandfather Walter and gazing at the snowy scene outside, he continued, Father, I've lived knowing only half of our family's history. And I was forcing the same mistake on my daughter. Margaret took Olivia's hand. Olivia, you've been fighting alone all this time, her voice was heavy with regret. Tears overflowed from Olivia's eyes. I wanted to help people as a doctor too. But in my own way. Caroline rushed to her sister and embraced her tightly. I've always envied you, sis. For having the courage to choose your own path, not bound by others' expectations. As the fire in the fireplace continued to burn quietly, the family candidly shared their feelings with each other. Anger, regret, understanding, and gradually emerging signs of reconciliation. As the night deepened, years of misunderstandings and prejudices slowly melted away. Before dawn, outside the window, the snow had stopped, and moonlight illuminated the snow-covered landscape in silver. The family was still in the study. Despite their tired expressions, a light of new understanding dwelled in each of their eyes. Stanley stood before Olivia and took a deep breath. Olivia, we need time, he said quietly. Years of preconceptions don't disappear in one night. But now. He stumbled over his words, then continued. Now I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. For the first time in his life, he embraced Olivia with sincere feelings. That embrace contained something inexpressible in words: regret for the past, hope for the future, and unconditional love. Margaret joined them, then Caroline, and finally Grandfather Walter. The five embraced, confirming the family's new bond. Complete reconciliation would take time. Values and expectations cultivated over decades don't change overnight. But the Montgomery family had taken a new step forward that night. Adjust the window placement there a bit more southward so the afternoon light doesn't directly hit the patients, Olivia Montgomery gave instructions to the site supervisor as she walked through the construction site of the new wing of Boston Children's Medical Center. Her instructions were precise, and behind her followed young architects taking notes. 2 years had passed since Grandfather Walter's birthday, and Olivia's life had changed dramatically. She had established Montgomery Healing Spaces, a company specializing in the design and construction of medical facilities that enhance therapeutic effects, as an architect with a medical license. Her innovative approach had attracted attention from both the medical and construction industries, and now project requests were pouring in from all over the country. Olivia, regarding this nurse's station placement, considering emergency routes. Turning around, there stood her father Stanley. He was checking the details with a professional eye, holding the blueprints. Her father, who had once disowned Olivia, initially kept his distance, but as he heard about her success and the practical application of medical knowledge, he gradually softened his attitude. 6 months ago, he visited Olivia's company and offered, as a neurosurgeon, I'd like to provide professional opinions on the healing effects of the spaces you design. Now Stanley is involved in his daughter's company as a medical consultant 2 days a week. Yes, Dad. That's an important point, Olivia smiled as she listened to her father's suggestion. Returning to the office, Mother Margaret was advising young architects in front of a model of a maternity ward. She too had recently begun participating in her daughter's company part-time. How important the environment is in the experience of childbirth. Margaret's expertise was adding new depth to Olivia's projects. Olivia, I finished proofreading the paper, her sister Caroline appeared with coffee. Caroline and Olivia had co-authored a paper on the fusion of medicine and architecture that received high praise in medical journals. While maintaining her position as an active physician, Caroline actively collaborated with her sister's work. Thanks, Caroline, Olivia answered with a smile. Looks like we'll make it in time for next week's presentation. On the weekend, the family gathered to celebrate Grandfather Walter's 92nd birthday. His health had declined slightly, but his mind remained sharp, and he was genuinely delighted with his granddaughter's success. During the celebration, Stanley stood up and raised his glass. I have a special announcement today, he looked around at the family. Montgomery Healing Spaces will officially restart as Montgomery Construction and Medical. Olivia looked up at her father in surprise. Stanley continued, I think the time has come to formally merge our family's 2 traditions, medicine and construction. In the entrance hall hung a newly created company sign. Grandfather Walter stood before it and said tearfully, true tradition is something that changes form while inheriting its heart. The family took a commemorative photo in front of the sign. Her parents, who once called Olivia a disgrace and clung to the false tradition of a family of physicians, now accepted the true history of the family and were genuinely proud that their daughter had brilliantly merged the two bloodlines. It's not just about treating people, but also creating environments that promote healing, Margaret said quietly. And buildings aren't merely structures, but also support the health of those who live in them, Stanley added. Over a long period, true reconciliation and family bonds had been nurtured, and the Montgomery family had reclaimed their tradition in the truest sense.